Final video for the next couple weeks is on W.E.B. Du Bois, The Souls of Black Folks in 1903. And then obviously, like, this is kind of like the focus of the paper. So just kind of scrolling back up. What problems do African Americans face in terms of their identity? So you already see the key term, the one I ended with from last time, this idea of double consciousness. And then you're going to want to refer this back to the Washington. So we do the Washington first. Kind of the first half of the paper is probably going to be on Du Bois. Scroll back down. Pretty good picture. Looks like Du Bois lived a pretty long time, 95 years if my math's correct. So again, he saw these dramatic changes in his lifetime. It's kind of interesting and cool. And so this is the thing to focus on for the readings, this idea of double consciousness. So it's looking at oneself through the eyes and perspective of others. So again, I think if you're going to do like Wikipedia and these other kind of biographies, he's kind of like this forefather of sociology, psychology here. So again, this is this kind of idea that I think is very much still part of the rhetoric that these essentially contemporary thinkers that delve into race issues are dealing with. So again, I've had other classes where students, really knew Du Bois, and they agree with me. Yeah, it's just a very influential thinker that, again, if we don't take the time to read these, you might not otherwise get. So here's my commentary. Du Bois is concerned with this psychology, double consciousness, sociological perspective of Black American citizens. He notes that Black Americans have a unique social identity in the United States. They are neither fully American or African, but kind of both at the same time, right? So again, because of this kind of transplant of people, the removal of culture, the remnants of culture, yeah, it's a really, I don't want to undermine the horrors of slavery, but it's an interesting sociological perspective to be in because of that, right? So that's kind of interesting to keep in mind. His idea of double consciousness seems to entail, one, Black folks having to understand how white Americans generally viewed them, the Black community. This would seem to entail white folks viewing Blacks in part as African Americans, while at the same time understanding themselves in actuality in relation to the broader and wider American culture, right? So I have this clip here you can watch. I think explains it probably better than I do. It helped me understand it better. It is again important to note Blacks for Du Bois would recognize that they have a unique identity that is neither fully American or African. This is a challenging idea to grasp initially, but I think it does make sense. And again, you can watch the video if you want some more feedback. Another important aspect of Du Bois's readings is the idea of self-recognition for Black Americans and their social context they were, or maybe still are, situated in. Key to note is the standards they held. Excuse me, I'm getting tired. Held by the dominant white American culture did not make sense when applied to the realities faced by the Black community immediately after the Civil War. I think I'm glad I wrote this stuff down because it's hard to kind of do off the top of your head. So this is kind of my response to Booker T. Washington, right, from the previous reading, right? So again, it's not all just hard work and pragmatic skills. At least it doesn't seem like, if I've done this in a sufficiently charitable way. So if a person has just been set free from slavery, it is highly unlikely that they would have any education or economic resources at all. I think that stands to reason. So one does not fail to be successful in America simply because they did not work hard, right? So the idea work hard in America, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, I think is something that people who are particularly sympathetic to Du Bois' view project out offhand. It's what are you talking about? I can work really hard, but if you're not going to give me the opportunity, that hard work's not going to overcome anything, right? Other factors contribute to attaining success. People also require equality of opportunity through civil rights to have a chance to be successful. So much of what will be addressed by Du Bois in our readings is that the Black community must cultivate its collective political power to overcome obstacles of oppression. So again, this to me is the main thing to focus on is that from my perspective, Washington is focused on economics and Du Bois is focused on politics. Some political ideologies we talked about see them as being intertwined and not different. Some of them see them as different. Some see economic freedom as more important. Some see political freedoms as more important. All this stuff is things that you really need to consider and get it straight in your head as you write your papers and present your arguments, right? Indeed, hard work would be necessary in improving the standing of Black Americans, but Du Bois thinks that this requires more than straightforward economic logic of acquiring pragmatic working skills offered by thinkers like Washington. Okay, enough of the explanations, right? We'll get to our stuff. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you really focus on that big difference there. Here we get to the readings themselves. He would not Africanize America, for America has too much to teach the world and Africa. He would not bleach his Negro soul in a flood of white Americanism, for he knows that his Negro blood has a message for the world. So again, this is kind of building off that idea of, say, double consciousness, right? Du Bois desires to be both American and black without having opportunities closed to him. Double consciousness causes one to be half-hearted in either cause, right? So it's kind of like sociological impediment the black community faces because of the circumstances it was exposed to for hundreds of years, right? The nation has not yet found peace with its sins. The freed man has not, sorry for the typos, that happens from time to time, has not, oh, now my face is gone, my beautiful face, has not yet found in freedom his promised land. He felt his ignorance, not simply of letters, but of life, of business, and of the humanity. So again, not too different from Du Bois here. The power of the ballot we need is sheer self-defense, else what shall save us from second slavery? So again, a much more explicit political message from Du Bois. This isn't, at least, again, I'm not a Booker T. Washington expert, but from what we read, what was assigned, there really isn't much discussion here in that regard, other than perhaps the kind of mending of fences with other communities is probably a pretty sound political message, but not as explicit as this. There is a theme in the reading that's centered around the role of the government or the state, right? Many issues, especially social issues like racial justice, require some kind of political response and seem likely that they require the government to play some role. Again, something that was thought about during the Civil Rights era, which Du Bois made it to, right? So again, that kind of last part of his life was when these things were really starting to, rubber was hitting the road. And again, maybe things we're still arguing about and trying to figure out today. So on Booker T. Washington and others. So Du Bois asserts that government involvement seemed much needed and would have avoided future problems. Basically, I guess I should put that there. Du Bois characterized Washington's view as submission and silence to civil and political rights. Du Bois holds national white opinion made Washington a black leader, but not the actual black community. Again, this is something you hear about all the time, like who were leaders in the black community, right? So again, when you hear a lot of, like, say, conservative black people, there's a lot of unfortunate, like, racial animus that gets spouted out about people who disagree with, say, like mainline Democratic politics. Washington represents in Negro thought the old attitude of adjustment and submission. Again, is that fair? That's for you guys to discern for yourselves. Mentions the French grammar example of Washington from a reading, wonders what Socrates and St. Francis would say to this. So again, we get these kind of thinkers who talk about, like, human nature, about, like, kind of having to know kind of like these kind of more esoteric, important things, which then inform perhaps the pragmatic skills. So it's like, why are you working hard? What is it, or do you have a life worth living? So they definitely disagree again with that STEAM debate from earlier, like what comprises a good education. Du Bois thought Washington was unnecessarily narrow. First, slavery and race prejudice are potent, if not sufficient causes for the Negro's position. Second, industrial and common school training were necessarily slow planting because they had to await black teachers trained by higher institutions. So as I kind of mentioned that earlier. And three, though true Negro must help himself, it is equally true that unless his striving not be simply seconded, but rather aroused and encouraged by the initiatives of the richer and the wiser environing group, he cannot hope for great success. So it's just kind of like, you have to know people can be successful. You have to have these kind of role models in society. And again, one great way of achieving that is through political means, right? By having political leaders. And the first thing that, white Americans did, particularly in the South, was to move to disenfranchise freed blacks who had just to gain the franchise, to do things to kind of take away that political power. So again, when you know the history, I'm sure Brent might have some great insights. You really see kind of like why Du Bois is echoing the points that he's making, right? Chapter 5, Du Bois notes that there is too much concern over wealth or wealth acquisition. Man, I gotta go through these notes again. These may simply be a mechanism to keep Black Americans working, thus not asking about political matters. He is, man, I'm going to have to redo these notes. He is worried, sorry guys. He is worried people are selling out in their kind of modern parlance. For their own immediate improvement over their long-term equality. Right? But the true college will ever have one goal, not to earn meat, but to know the end and aim of that life, which was the meat was meant to nourish. I already kind of echoed that point. Hopefully that makes sense. Ask a question with regards to that if you don't, that doesn't make sense to you. For Du Bois, and again pushing back against Washington, making a scholar into a blacksmith is also a problematic state of affairs, right? So again, like, yeah, like it's kind of like less pragmatic skills have their place, but also like if you're like me, trying to make me a mechanic would be useless because I'm not a good mechanic. So maybe I can contribute. There's more than one way to contribute to society and your community. Without ideals, people will fail to succeed and will instead fall to their baser natures. Life is more than practical skills and work, from Du Bois's perspective. Perhaps you disagree. Progress in human affairs is more often a pull than a push. I mean, if that doesn't sum up the civil rights movement, I don't know what does. And this will come back again when you guys read the Goldwater, who was a conservative Republican and was really kind of against civil rights, not because he was racist, but because he didn't want to be pushed into these things, or say pulled, excuse me, where you have to be pushed. Surging forward with the exceptional man and the lifting of his duller brethren slowly and painfully to his vantage ground. So again, you don't get like this kind of momentum that kind of changes things over time, like a push or builds up pressure. You have to yank people to the right moral place sometimes. This is a good quotation to end on as it encapsulates Du Bois's view of political struggle. He acknowledges, very similarly to Douglas, reading the political change will be difficult, and oftentimes to the correct I think this is what I wanted to say. And oftentimes doing the correct thing will upset many people, if not the majority of people. Yet it is still important to undertake the political fight for justice and accept that people in power will be upset, or just people in general. This was not the approach to Washington, right? Du Bois finds the tactics of Washington to actively avoid upsetting the white community and to be a self-defeating one, right? Because again, if your political stance is oppression, and I have to like say, well, you shouldn't oppress me, and that's going to piss you off, I have to say it. I have to move against that oppression. So I think Du Bois has really, really good points. It's a great reading. Confront is immoral behavior for Du Bois, and this can only be done utilizing the political strength of the black community, right? So yeah, like individual versus community, collective versus individualist. Like again, we have not changed the underlying themes of this class from Rousseau to Mill to Locke to the Greeks. The pragmatic kind of observations, say, on Machiavelli, the idealistic observations of someone like Marx. Again, we're just getting it another flavor. So hopefully, even though we don't have a test in this class, you guys really see these interconnected themes and are able to kind of see why you're writing these papers. Again, like each paper is its own kind of separate contained thing, but they also kind of connect. And I think the true mark of a college class and getting a good college education is taking the basic skills, learning what things like double consciousness means, like learning the particulars, but then being able to abstract out, like, what's the broader point here? And again, it's okay if you're not doing that. It's okay if you have a hard time doing that. These are the questions we should be asking in class. And this is why I have so much fun talking, why I probably end up dominating so much of the conversation in class. So that's it for our next paper. We're done with videos for a couple weeks. I think I have 2 more videos to make, which I'll do later in the semester. And then we're going to have, I guess, 3 more papers after this one. So we're in the back half of class. Really, really participate. Really, really ask questions. Really, really read. I don't have problems with you guys. Everything's been great. But especially if you're one of the few people who might be at a lower B. I think everyone has a B in the class, if not higher. Yeah, like let's get those grades. Let's everyone get A's. So That's it for this reading. I hope it made sense, and I will see you guys in class and in the next videos. So see you later.